Welcome to a special edition of Virtual Legends of the Game. We're honored to have an opportunity to speak today with Hall of Famer Joe Torre, member of the Hall of Fame's class of 2014. And we're going to spend all of our time talking about this very important anniversary, 20th anniversary of one of the most tragic days in American history, September 11th, 2001. We'll talk to Joe about his experiences that day, his recollections, and some of the things that have happened since then. Joe, welcome to the program. We thank you, as always, for being generous with your time. As I look back at this, it's kind of surreal for me. I think about September 11th, 2001. In some ways, it feels like it happened just a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And then in other ways, it feels like it was a lifetime ago. For some reason, it's hard for me to pinpoint in time. Do you have feelings like that at all?
Yeah, it doesn't go away. Not that you want it to go away, because it's, as you said, it was one of the darkest days in our history, and just the fact that it happened on our turf. I think that's the one thing that just grabs your attention. I mean, like a lot of other kids, when you're watching old war movies and stuff, and you say to yourself, the war, I wonder where this took place. It was always on somebody else's turf. And to have something happen in New York City, my hometown, and of course in Pennsylvania and DC, it was absolutely scary, and you look back on it, 20 years ago, and I was just probably milling around my bedroom. I hadn't even turned on the TV because I was going to a charity luncheon in Manhattan. So I was, getting dressed and stuff, and the phone rang, and it was the car service that was due to pick me up, and they said, I guess it's called off. I said, what are you talking about? And then I turned on the TV, and there it was for all of us to see. It changed your life. I mean, right there, what you're watching, and it's for real, and it was, it sticks with you, and again, it's not something that you ever want to forget.
It was a Tuesday. The Yankees were scheduled to play that night against the White Sox at the stadium. Roger Clemens was going to start the game that night. So you're obviously back in the New York area. As you said, you were at your home, and you were preparing to go to a charity event when that got canceled. I suppose being from the New York City area, having a lot of family in the area, that must have been one of the first things that popped into your mind, concerned about relatives and friends in New York City.
Well, Bruce, the first thing that I thought of, because I was upstairs, my wife and my daughter, which was the first day of school for her, she was 5 years old. So I'm when I see something that caught my attention on TV, I got to go downstairs and make sure she's not watching this. And of course, my wife was tending to her when I got downstairs, and my wife obviously knew what was happening because she had the TV on. And then you didn't know what to think about first. Baseball all of a sudden went for the most important thing in my life at that point to way back here, because of what's happening. My son, who worked in the Wall Street area, trying to get a hold of him. And as it turned out, we finally got a hold of him because cell service was almost nil. You wanted to make calls, but you couldn't get through anywhere.
Did it take a long time to reach him?
It took a long time. It felt like longer than it was, probably. But he was late for work, which probably was a good thing. He was on the other side, on the New Jersey side of the Holland Tunnel, coming across. And I had a sister-in-law, my wife's sister, who was a flight attendant for American Airlines. And she was flying reserve, so you never know where she may be. and we did finally find out that, you know, she was safe and sound. But you're right. I mean, you think of relatives, you think of, you know, who do you know that's working in the World Trade Center, and uh, it was just stunning. I mean, you know, to this day when I think back of that, you try to, you know, recall your memory and what your mind, but my mind was like scrambled eggs. It was just going all over the place.
Guy I went to school with, Adam Lewis, graduated with me, Hamilton College, which is not too far from here in Cooperstown. We both graduated in 1987. I found out several weeks that he was in the towers and had died, and it hit hard. Did you find out later on that there might have been somebody you knew that had perished?
Well, there were people that I knew that lost a relative. But the view that caught me, Bruce, is when you're watching people jump out of windows. Evidently, it was so scorching, they just had to do something different, and it was horrific. I mean, I can't think of words that can describe it adequately. And it was remarkable. And when I say so few people, you know, died, I mean, aside from the firefighters who also gave their lives, but it just caught your attention, and you were scared. You were frightened. And as I say, baseball was something that I lived. I mean, I didn't only do it, I lived it. And yeah, we had been rained out the night before. Roger Clemens was supposed to pitch against his old club, the Red Sox. We got rained out, so he, you know, his start was going to be moved, and he was going to, I believe he was going for his 20th victory. And then you know, you start thinking about your players. You know, obviously everything stops. I mean, you have a baseball game scheduled, but you're not even thinking that, you know, you're waiting for somebody to let you know the game was called. You knew what was going on, that, you know, everybody's going to be frozen in time at this point in time.
September 11th was a Tuesday. A few days later, it's a Saturday, and you and several of the players were scheduled to make some public appearances. You went to the Javits Center. You went to St. Vincent's Hospital. I believe you may have gone to one other location. Tell us about that Saturday.
Yeah, well, we had a workout on Saturday. Once we found out we were going to crank it up again and start the season, or restart the season, we were actually scheduled that weekend to play in Tampa. And we were supposed to play like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, which is a wraparound weekend, which is not normally how a schedule goes or a series goes, but every once in a while it happens. And so it was a decision that had to be made. Are we going to fly, because they were going to start the season on Monday, are we going to fly to Tampa for one game and then fly? I mean, first of all, the flying part became something that you weren't sure of all of a sudden. So it was decided that we would go straight to Chicago, where we were going to play the White Sox on Tuesday. And so on Saturday, we called for a workout at Yankee Stadium, just for those who were still there. We knew some players had driven and gone to their homes, because, you know, when it's early September like that, the families who were living elsewhere and had children, you know, had to get back for school and all that. So there were a lot of players who were driving home. I know that Clemens and Pettit, you know, jumped in the car and then drove to Texas and stuff. So when we had the workout on Saturday, we had a number of players show up, and then it was talked about about going into Manhattan. And I had a number of players. I had several coaches, and Randy Levine, our president, set this up, and we had several vans that we drove into the city with. And first stop, was the Javits Center, where we, saw all the first responders and the firefighters from different parts of the country who were there basically, to sleep and eat and then go back to hopefully recover some people, and hopefully you found some people that were still alive, and it was sad, because by that point in time it didn't feel like that they had found anyone alive. Then from there we went to St. Vincent's Hospital, and this pretty much verified, things we had sensed, because there was nobody there for us to visit, other than there were some firefighters there who were, suffering from smoke inhalation. So we had a short stop, obviously, at St. Vincent's, and then we went on to the armory. Now, the armory, we come to find out, is where the relatives of the people who perished were waiting for DNA results. And I was a little hesitant about, invading their privacy, and felt it was such a personal time for them that I wasn't sure that that's where we should be. So Randy Levine went in while we sat in the vans, and he, after, I guess he was in there maybe 5 minutes, and waved us on in. So everything was, was okay for us to go in. And we went in, and the floor of the armory, it was wall-to-wall people, okay? And they had like low partitions where they were separating families. And, you'd have clergymen and counselors, and we sort of walked around the perimeter, and then one family sort of signals for us to come on in. And so we went over there, and Bernie Williams, one of our players, was with us, and he goes up to this woman, and he said, and this is what has stuck with me all these years. Bernie Williams went up to this woman, and he says, "I do not know what to say, but you look like you need a hug." And with that, he squeezed tight and gave her a hug, and then from there, all of a sudden, other families and people would come over, and they would show us pictures, photos of their loved ones in, a Yankee cap or a T-shirt or a jersey, and just talking about they're Yankee fans, and by this time, it was pretty well determined that no results are gonna be forthcoming. So, but one thing I did realize at that point in time, when all those people were sort of welcoming us in with open arms, is that we had a job to do. Baseball had a responsibility, and it was really to get in the way of the suffering that these people were going through, and just something that happened like that, and they needed something, and I just felt that baseball had a responsibility at that point.
This is remarkable to me because you're a good speaker. You have a knack for saying the right thing. You've done it as a broadcaster. You've done it as a manager, maybe to a lesser extent as a player. But it sounds like you were in a situation at the Armory where you really didn't know what to say, or if you should say anything at all.
I didn't know what to say, because what we do for a living is a game. I know it's more than that to us, in situations you get so into it. But, when you start comparing it to life or death, we play a game.
Yeah.
And at that, but I realized that our game had a value at that point. It just felt that it was something that sort of cleared the air for me, because again, I had no idea what I was going to say to my players when we all got to Chicago and get ready to restart the season. And when we did go, when I had my meeting before the game, I was explaining, what we did in New York and the visit we made, and I just felt that, they need this, and that the NY on the cap stands for more than the New York Yankees. It really stands for the city of New York, and we have a responsibility to go out there and give them something to watch and maybe be distracted from
Yeah.
what was totally encompassing them.
The Yankees resume play 1 week later, Tuesday, September the 18th. So in retrospect, you really feel that was probably the right amount of time?
I tell you, it didn't go away. You'd sit in the ballpark, but I tell you something that was different right away, Bruce. You're there in Chicago playing the White Sox, and if you're a Yankee fan, people either like, if you're a Yankee, I should say, people either love you or hate you. There's no in between the Yankees. You're either rooting for the Yankees or you don't want the Yankees ever to win. And then you look out in the stands and people are holding banners and they're saying, "We love New York." It was such a different atmosphere. Even though they wanted to come to the ballpark, all of a sudden everybody felt that we had a job to do. And the support, and New York, I'm born and raised in the New York area, and a lot of people get intimidated by going to New York. They're a little overwhelmed by how big it is and how fast the pace is. But when something tragic happens, and obviously 9/11 is unlike anything you ever experienced, but like a blackout or something like that, all of a sudden everybody's opening their arms to you. They want to make it easier for you. They want to help you. New York, they have a big heart. Yeah. They have a big heart. And they're not only open their arms, they'll open their homes. And so it was something. I knew people, friends of mine, who every day would go to ground zero and see if they can help in any way. They didn't know what they were going to do, but they were willing to do whatever was needed. And so being a baseball person, and we were on the road, so we really never had a chance to experience. It would be, I forget now how long we're on the road for, probably that series or one more series, because it would have been Tampa and then the White Sox, and it may have been one more series. But it never went away. I mean, whether it was the right time to start, whether a week was long enough, I don't think it mattered. It was a matter of getting back to doing what we needed to do. But after that armory visit, I certainly felt it was necessary for us to play baseball.
Joe, did you sense that most, if not all, of the players were ready to come back on the 18th?
I sense that.
Yeah.
I think they And in all fairness, you know, we had more of a purpose. I mean, we're obviously want to get to postseason. We want to go to the World Series and all that. But the one thing that we have an advantage over other people, it gives us a place to hide. You know, we go out there, and the only way you can play this game is to, you know, tunnel vision and get yourself in there and play the game, which wasn't easy because it takes a little time. You know, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer back in '99, and when I did finally come back to manage, you know, cancer's on your mind, but once you start playing the game, after a while, you know, that takes priority. And once we started playing baseball, I think the resolve, and I'm not saying this because, you know, to be dramatic, but you know, we're pretty focused with the Yankees because you know, we had just been to 3 World Series, and you know, we were hoping to continue that. But you got reminded every single day that it was just more than baseball.
There are thousands of stories that come out of this tragedy. One of the firefighters who responded to the attacks was actually a former Major League player, Frank Tepedino, who had once played for the Yankees. I'm curious if you know Frank, if you've ever had a chance to talk to him since that day.
No, I haven't, but I know Frank. I mean, you know, casually, obviously, and it, as I say, I was shocked that there, you know, I didn't know more people that had passed. I know Canna Fitzgerald, and I had, you know, we had done something, you know, different things for Canna Fitzgerald, and then and since, you know, they every September 11th they have a fundraiser, and I've been a part of that a number of times. But yeah, you know, Frank Tepedino is someone, you know, I was familiar with as far as knowing he was part of our, you know, our baseball family.
For those who might not be aware, Tepedino was not on duty that day, but when he heard about what happened, drove out there. It'd normally be a very short drive. It took him about 4 hours to make it there through all the traffic and all the chaos. He did lots of things along with other people, moved debris, opened manhole covers, helped out with distribution of food and water, tried to help out with excavation as well. He and a number of his friends worked in 24-hour shifts in the immediate aftermath of the attacks. Joe, I'm curious about baseball in general and its ability, or maybe its inability, to help in situations like this. And as a parallel, I think of Willie Horton in 1967. Detroit was ravaged by racial strife, rioting in the streets. Willie Horton, after a doubleheader on a Sunday, went into the streets in Detroit, took a megaphone, urged people to go home, urged them to stop participating essentially in acts of violence. Willie strongly believes, and I agree with him, that baseball can have an impact, that he did have an impact on that situation. Obviously, he couldn't solve it by himself, but certainly a positive, substantial impact. Do you think baseball can help in at least recovering somewhat from something like a 9/11?
Yeah, as I say, you know, when you're in the game, you realize how important it is to you. You're not always that familiar how many people you touch in doing what you do. I think 9/11 made me a little more sensitive to understanding how many people need sporting events. I mean, when you look in the stands at a sporting event, say somebody scores a touchdown for your team, you're shaking hands with everybody in the area. You don't know their name, but you're excited. I mean, that's what sports, I think, has done. And baseball, you know, being the longest season of all the sports, to me, has always been a game of life. I mean, people talk about, you know, do you motivate your players every day? And you know, baseball, like football, you sort of gradually get up for that one game a week, and then you come down and you sort of build it up again for the next week. Baseball, like, this is as high as you can go. I think you have to be somewhere in here, baseball, because to stay, you couldn't stay up here. Since you play baseball almost every day, you got to find something in here that you can repeat every day. So there's a level of motivation and effort that you have to keep ratcheted up, but it has to be manageable. And so, you know, that's why I refer to baseball as a game of life, because you do it every day. It's not something you have to motivate. I mean, there are times, obviously, as a manager, you feel something needs to be said or needs to be done to get somebody's attention. But after 9/11 especially, nobody needed a poke in the rear end, because there was a purpose, more of a purpose, I should say, in you know, showing up for work every day and giving the people what they really require at this point in time, or what they really needed at this point in time.
Final question for Joe Torre. As a special assistant to the commissioner, is something like the anniversary of 9/11, is that something that you feel almost falls under your purview? Is that something that you feel you specifically can help with?
I feel responsible that since I was sort of in the middle of, you know, the post 9/11 experience, it's something I feel is a responsibility of all of us, because the one thing, and the one thing you've heard in reference to 9/11 is we will never forget. And you shouldn't forget. You know, Pearl Harbor in 1941, you never forget. And this is in our lifetime. And the one thing, Bruce, that struck me, because from 9/11 to this day, the Yankees play God Bless America in the 7th inning. And we always got out of the dugout, held our hand over our chest, and listened for God Bless America. A lot of time it was a member of the services, or a firefighter, or a police, or a police man or woman singing. And they would pan the stands. And the one thing that always choked me up was when they would go by and there's a 7, 8, 9-year-old child. And it just struck a nerve with me that these kids will never enjoy the freedoms we had when we were their age. And so baseball, I think, you know, it's our responsibility to put on our Sunday best and make sure that these people look back and be reminded what we experienced, you know, 20 years ago today.
Joe, we appreciate it very much. Thoughtful remarks, insightful comments on the 20th anniversary of September 11th. We do appreciate your time. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Bruce.
Member of the Hall of Fame's class 2014, Joe Torre, standout manager, player, winner of 4 World Championships, is reflected on September 11th, 20 years later. It's a day to remember. It's a day to be thoughtful, and also a day to think ahead toward the future as well. We appreciate Joe's time. We appreciate all of you participating, watching today's program from Cooperstown, New York. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.